the Aboriginal tribe before the Spanish, the Dutch, and the British arrived. Saying we was from Africa and stole the birthright. That's a trick move, something that a dirty war would do. Claim your nationality of the land, you get screwed. So we studied your background, the treaties you wrote. Fake as history, we ain't go over here on no boat. Frontin' like you indigenous to the land, you disgust me. The tomahawks back in our hands, it's getting ugly. You running around screaming black power, cause it sells to the truth. Rivers fell with a bull and high hills. Native Americans butt hurt, can't tell, cause they know damn well the trail of tears ain't real. Respect the Aborigine, this land is ours, and though you all, you still a guest, motherfucker. I have one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling me myself. I have one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling me myself. House nigga, real nigga, fake nigga, feel nigga. My skin ain't black, what the deal, nigga? Salute on my real shit, it's Aborigines, owners of the land and every goddamn tree and every goddamn sea. Invaders ever cross to step foot on the land and you can step the fuck off. Breathe, you gon' make us swing the sacred tomahawk. Fucking around with us with that black conscious talk. Fake pics of slave ships, that's the reference. Bravely African, look, you gon' need more evidence. I'm American, Aboriginal, indigenous, Chibokity is latest. That shit is rhetoric, stay woke. Aboriginal, get out. Your civil rights acts, all you can eat, big out. The Stockholm syndrome, mix skits out. Phoenix Moon got the antidote, get that shit out. Meanwhile, rapping about my birthright, fuck a freestyle. Teach each man, each woman, each child. Black race is really Indians indeed now. Man, they indeed now. Halito, Title 18, G goes. Pilgrims get big gold with Phoenix and Beast Mode. Bring them up peoples out of the sleep. Oh, we ain't black, colors, Africans or Negroes. I got one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling me myself. I had one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling me myself.
Halito. Chickamagua beloveds, what's happening, everybody? So this is the first time I'm doing this. I'm actually doing a simulcast. I am on Clubhouse and I'm also on YouTube for the presentation, part of the revolutionary series that I wanted to drop just from a different perspective. You know, I look at things from the truthful side, not the ruthful side, right? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to drop the link here so you guys can keep up with the Discord. Let me see. Hold on one second. Put that there for you. Copy that. You definitely want to follow the Discord. Let me drop that in the chat. But you know, the Revolutionary War, we're determining depending on where you are in your genealogy. So certainly for the people that have been able to trace their ancestry pre-colonial, this is certainly going to be a treat from a whole different perspective. So you can kind of understand the political positions, financial situations that people were faced with, and things that they thought that they were doing what was right. Some people did a whole lot of snake shit. In any event, we're going to get into a bunch of that. But what we always know what the outcome is was for George Washington and for the Tories. The Tories were the people that wanted to claim title to this land, free and independent of Britain and its territories. However, what people don't really understand is France is the ones that financed the United States, and France is the reason why the United States won. Also, with the help of the French Indians, who I'm going to assume by some of these documents, they mean the Choctaw, right? And the great numbers of those particular tribes that were in alliance, such as the Chickasaws as well. There's a period where they just start calling them French Indians. They still have Choctaws, of course, but if it makes when you start to see how these things they started wording things differently, that's because there's an interruption in the way things were normally going politically for them. So with that being said, I want to let me drop the source, and keep in mind, out of what is it, maybe 240 years of conflict here in the United States before they ever even left out of the United States to go fight a foreign war. Okay, so I'm gonna run down what some of these wars are um, by the Department of War, the War Department, rather. And in 1776, the American Revolutionary War, also called Chickamagua Wars, also called Second Cherokee War, and the Pennimite-Yankee Wars. Okay, so that's just in 1776 going on here in America. You got your Boston Tea Party, all of these different things going on at the same time while they're trying to have import, export, cotton, slavery, sugarcane, tobacco, all of these things. Well, cotton came a little later, but tobacco at this point was absolutely the main crop. All the way up until 1783, these are the American Revolutionary, Chickamauga, Pennimite Wars. Let me drop this in the Discord for you. I'll drop it in the chat so you guys can see where I'm reading from. And then this way you'll be able to look it up on your own time. I dropped the Discord already. So that's where you can find that. Sometimes YouTube disables the link, so I'm not going to put too many in there. But that is the link to the Discord for the okay. Dang, lost me for a second, right? See how that go? That's okay. That's okay. I'm back. Sorry, guys. They completely blinked me out. Yeah, that was weird. But okay. So let me drop this in Discord for you so you can read about the wars that I'm talking about. And this is a PDF. And of course, you don't really hear too much on these wars, but pretty much every war here is leading up to different things that have happened. So I'm just going to touch on what's going on from the 1776 period up until your 1790, who these other people, how they're making their way towards the West and creating conflict with them on the other side, slavery, the whole kidnapping thing. So on and so forth. So this is going to be why your Native Americans are kind of angry too from the other side of things and perspective. We'll get to them. But right now, this Revolutionary War, let me drop this document. And this is totally stuff you can share with the kids. There you go. It's in the Discord right now. Let me drop this here for the YouTubers. All right. Hold on one second. All right. Now, this is from the British perspective, how I'm going to start off. Could freestyle a little bit. It's a lot of interesting things here. But this is basically going to be about the different regiments that fought on the side of the British during the Revolutionary War. These are the people that, had to get sent off to other places, their descendants as well. It shows the different regiments from different places, various places in America that also participated as well. The start of what you call the American Legion. A lot of these places are in different Mason neighborhoods, not too far from Mason Halls and Eagles Lodges and things of that nature, other private clubs as well. Elks Club, American Legion for Foreign Wars, because these wars were foreigners fighting in them. That was established in opposition to George Washington. In the Continental Army. So these were the people that they were actually fighting. And I can give you some of the names. And the reason why I'm going to give the colonizer names, so it might make sense to people that find these European names in their genealogy. And then they may also attach you to either African people, or it will attach you to the Indian people that you may have come from. It'll also give you a drop of any migration patterns and other lines that may have stayed in the same area, and give you a better forensic idea of what's actually happened and what actually happened. So completely different perspective. And then, maybe stop being so opinionated, because especially if you don't know how the shit shaked out and what side of the fence your family was on, it's nothing but a stick trying to beat a stone over the stone, right? It's no need. So you have a Grenadier Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, Royal Highland Immigrants, 1777. So now, if you think people were getting kicked out for transportation, people were getting kicked out of Europe for transportation, which is also known as parole. Well, in these instances, when they would parole these people and send them to, some of them had choices, and these would be for the weirdest things. It could be for stealing a handkerchief, any of those things like that. I'm going to show also, let me go and see one of the catalogs so you can see. And there's an Immigrants in Bondage. I keep telling you guys about these card catalogs. And let me just show you how to get to it. Hold on, let me do a screen share. Un momento. Let me share the screen. Gotta mess with the catalogs. Definitely gotta mess with the catalogs. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay, so this is the card catalog. In your search criteria, you have the drop-down menu. You can search for the card catalog. Let's see. Immigrants. Is it bondage? Let me see. Let me just put bondage because I don't know the full. Okay. Immigrants in Bondage from 1614 to 1775. So here is a great chunk of who are your so-called Negropeans, who are your British people, who are the Irish slaves, who are the people coming to America, where did they land, how did they get here. Some of this is the answer to that. So you can tell if your people are here for transportation, that's what they called it, and you were really on parole. I want to show a little clip, but if I show the clip, then the ads, they might act funny with the ads and stuff. I don't know. I actually may have it. Do that. Okay, so this is the Immigrants in Bondage. This is a compilation of a book. So people have so much documentation out there. These are these funky books that nobody really looks at, and it takes for somebody to volunteer or maybe even get paid to upload this type of shit to Ancestry so that we're able to find these the information in an easy fashion. It still takes plenty of years for them to even upload this. They still have tons of documents that we haven't even seen yet. The card catalog is always constantly going to grow. So this is your immigrants in bondage. If anybody has anybody that you suspect is a European and you want me to look them up, this is the category where I am going to look them up at. So let me take one of my ancestors, and I know that they came into Maryland, right? And this is definitely out of the same bloodline, okay? And let's see. And it tells you the ship that he came on, he was a murderer, okay? Real shit. Real shit. Hold on, which one is him? I think 1722, I think it was. I think it was 1722. Here it is. So 1722, this is where another one of this bloodline, some of them which were already here in the 1600s, right? But this is how this part of the Langley branch ended up their ass here in America, right? And now it has this is the 1614 to 1775. So this departure date is January 1722, where they left London. He was sentenced there, the court and everything, the trial. They would hold trial generally sometimes in the summer. And he arrived in Annapolis, Maryland, July 1722. Okay, so it took a few months for them to get there. But his ass had to go, right? So now it tells you, here's another one. Now, I don't know who he is, but he was for Barbados, okay? Something that he did in Barbados. And this is from 1664 that this man, Thomas Langshaw, was sentenced to go to Barbados for whatever reason. Now, they do have a little legend here. Sometimes this means stealing. You might see murder. This T definitely does mean transportation. Whenever you see this T in the way that they transcribed it, this is exactly the way it will look in these really uninteresting books and shit. But when you do that, that is what they're talking about. You see the T transcribed, that means their ass got sent here for transportation. So this person here, another one, Thomas Langstaff, eventually October 1739, his ass got transportation. I'm going to assume the Summer Isles in Barbados, Barbados, Bermuda, which is literally a stone's throw, maybe 500 or 600 nautical miles away from Virginia and North Carolina. Does the Caribbean also start? So when you look at the 1640, the 1646, the 1677 Middle Plantation Treaty, you know that they're also including the West Indies, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and the yet to be born Georgia. That was all considered part of the West Indies as well. Okay. Don't believe me? Check out the treaty. Don't believe me? Read the treaty. Okay, so that is the category where you're going to see the people getting transportation. It's going to show the ship that they were on. And you can even go back and look at the trial of whatever it was that they was doing in London. So now this is where you cross-reference with the British archives and you find out what these men was doing. And some of these women, they were getting blamed for literally like stealing handkerchiefs, being outside at 10 o'clock at night. There was no special reason. Hey, we're going to kidnap this Negro peeing because he looked black. That was not the fucking case. They did not discriminate. And they was happy to get rid of people. From what I understand, even the Indians used to have complaints of how filthy London was, and how disconnected from the land they felt. So again, here's some other people getting sent to Barbados. And R is more than likely for return. Some of them tried to sneak their asses back, and again, they get kicked the fuck out indefinitely. Gloucester, Lent County. So now you see these records on Ancestor all bubbly, like, oh, I think I got a European ancestor or whatever. Well, now you'll know how the hell that European got here and why. Some of them were simply passengers coming to check and see what's going on the other side. A couple of them been going a couple of generations. I miss my aunt Nan, who's a descendant of the Mayflower or whatever the fuck. Reason that they also became a passenger here and got caught up in the mix. And some of their asses got enslaved. And I'm going to prove that too. Because when you see these people that Lord Dunmore is freeing, it's not all just Negroes. These are also people that were other free people, or if they were not white. Compiled census, everybody just kind of looks at the 1790 and forward census, but they do have compiled census records based on different counties, colonies, towns, things of that nature. So you have to go back to the time frame from when it was a colony versus when it was a parish, or when it was a state versus what, when it was a city or just a township. Was it incorporated? Was it not? Okay, so that's that one right there. So yeah, this is where you tell where your peoples got here, especially if they owed some type of something to the crown, right? For whatever reason, sparing their life. A lot of them would have just received death or whatever, but they had an opportunity to become sold here in America to the highest bidder for 14 years, 20, 21 years, different increments. Sold to the highest bidder, the same as anybody else that believes that they may have been enslaved. Actual facts. Actual facts. So now there's that catalog. Now let me close out of that. And now we're going to talk about Benedict Arnold. I'm going to go back. Hold on a second. Let's go here. And let me just do a little read on the Loyalists and what the Loyalists are. And this is through the Royal Provincial that I'm reading this from. And a lot of the links, I'll certainly post them in the Discord so that you can have the firsthand account. And you can also use, if you have the expanded or world version of Ancestry, you can always cross-reference a lot of this with those records through the British records of who came here in America. You are still going to be kind of limited, and you'll have to actually go and do your Helen Keller and feel your way around the British archives as well to get the other correspondent information. Because a lot of things were burnt up and a lot of things were lost, there's a lot of letters and things that they have to rely on besides the things that were published in like the Pennsylvania Gazette or the Virginia Gazette or the other places that may have had a print and press machine and were able to put out whatever information that may have been pertinent, whether it was public order, our public law, or different things that the public needed to be notified of. There's a big smallpox invasion coming or whatever would have you. Public notices were the big deal, but everybody couldn't afford to do public notices. So you'll notice as the interim of them having all of these conflicts and wars, they have to generate money. So this is why in their design, they knew that slavery would absolutely have to be, they assumed that it would be a necessary evil in order to be able to keep the lights on here before they even got on. This is before Thomas Edison was even born, right? And we're going to discuss some of the reasons why it's like that. But let me give you a little drop on what the Loyalists are. And it says, for our purposes, we define a loyalist as any inhabitant of North America from Newfoundland to Nicaragua, inclusive, plus the islands of the West Indies, Bermuda, and Jamaica, who served in a military capacity for the British or provided services of a military nature or other beneficial services to the Crown. So did you hear the places that they named? Any inhabitant of North America and Newfoundland to Nicaragua. other parts of the Americas, North, South, Central America, the West Indies, Bermuda, and Jamaica, who served in military capacity for the British or provided services of a military nature or other beneficial services to the crown. This definition includes those who fought in the war and remained in America afterwards, those who deserted, those who settled outside of America afterward, and those who were discharged or died during the war. There were, of course, loyalist civilians in numbers probably greater than the military, but the material contained within is geared predominantly towards the military. They cover some items that are tangents of the military, such as the theater, church records, and women's studies. A special section is devoted to the role of Black loyalists. While they have not specifically, we do not have specifically covered Native Americans as a group, we do have material concerning the Indian Department, which was generally speaking those Americans and Europeans who led and served alongside them. We also delve into the British regiments insofar as they relate to the Loyalists. So now it's going to tell you who's working with the Indians outside of what's happening. This is happening in a different scope that the public is not paying attention to, because as far as they know, they may know they hear of a war, but they can't read. They're not getting the newspapers. I doubt that that's all the buzz going on around the plantations until Lord Dunmore shows his ass up and gives everybody these different propositions, right? And for a slave, a person that had no way of ever being free, and all of their increase, whatever Lord Dunmore had to say sounded like a good fucking idea. So let me put this here. Now I'm going to go through the departments and read some of these notes. I'm going to look at the categories. Let me get this here. Hold on 1 second. And we're going to go through this list of military regiments. Right, so now when you see these in your Revolutionary War records, you can also tell if they were deserters. Sometimes they were caught and captured. There may be some sort of military correspondence between different regiments that say, hey, when you see Phoenix and Damon, them motherfuckers deserted, lock their asses up. And matter of fact, we're going to go burn their fucking farms down and all this other shit too back home, right? They want to make sure they send somebody. They'll send a 9-year-old on horseback that could get past the Indians through Indian country and get a message back to the people to make sure they stop us because we deserters, right? Hold on, let me put the screen share on. All right. So it's so interesting when you do have your genealogy. Now, if you see some of these granddaddies disappear, right? You see some of the granddaddies disappear. This may be wise, maybe as a result of the side they chose, right? You must consider Loyalist military. By far the most significant contribution of the Loyalists during the American Revolution was on the battlefield. Loyalists in one form or another served in virtually every engagement of the war. At the outbreak of the war, the British Army was like many in Europe at the time, small but very professional. During times of war, it was expected to expand with raising of new art regiments, both at home and in the colonies. The American Revolution was no different. At first, the British were slow to raise loyalist troops, but this was mostly due to being penned up in Boston. With the capture of New York, loyalists by thousands flocked to British and enlisted in nearly 24 battalions, then being raised by prominent gentlemen of the country. Further corps were raised when the army moved to Rhode Island and then Philadelphia. With the shift of the war south in 1779, thousands more flocked to the royal standard, serving in both provincial and militia corps. So they may be having, I don't want to say two pensions, but two different times that they enlisted. They may have said, okay, fight with us from 1776 to 1778. All right, bet, you're not dead. All right, well, we need y'all again. Right? Because now there's other conflict happening. So they had to hire these same people again. And they had to get help from other people as well. All told, perhaps 50,000 served at one time or another on the land or on the sea, while the Army and Land War is our main focus on the site. One should not forget the thousands who served the British as sailors, either on board privateers, transports, civil branch vessels, or in the Royal Navy. Many who volunteered for service never saw the end of war. Troops died, sometimes by the score, due to disease, fatigue, and unsanitary conditions. Smallpox could debilitate an entire regiment in a matter of days. The rigors of military life, or the boredom often attended with it, drove hundreds and perhaps thousands to desert. Some had a change of heart, others went on to more lucrative ventures, such as privateers. More went home to be with their families. The war left a lasting mark on hundreds of veterans, the survivors of the battles who lost an arm or a leg, so many, in fact, that the British formed an entire regiment of them from the wounded, infirm, and worn out of the British and Loyalist corps. Corps were raised in every theater in which the British served, and we have tried to provide a wide representation as possible. This has been a rather ambitious undertaking, and we still have regiments to add into regimental history section. So if you don't see any documents here, there are yet a unit you are seeking, please check back. So they're telling you to check back on this website. But again, I'm telling you to just base it off of your records. If it don't apply, let it fly, but you definitely want to know what was going on. So now these muster rolls could have also been before the conflict. So these are the different categories that they have. The list of regiments, regimental history, and the list of regiments says it's a complete list of all known Loyalist regiments that served during the American Revolution, along with their dates of service, plus a discussion of the different types of regiments and charts depicting the typical organizational structure of various units. The next category is regimental history, articles plus period accounts and records relating to various Loyalist regiments. We will be adding material to this section. Then they go on to the muster rolls, the orderly books, the court martials, regular Army and Navy documents, civil branches, the spies, and people don't necessarily know if they're slave ancestors or Indian ancestors or their European ancestors were involved in the whole espionage scheme that they had. And they couldn't have done it without this scheme going on against the French, people that were slaves that were able to spy against Benedict Arnold, for on behalf of the Continental Army. Virtually with not really any real promises or anything, just a whole lot of love and loyalty. I'm not really sure why. Perhaps it may be family. A lot of people are named George Washington, such and such. So I don't really know how that goes. No need to speculate until you get to the bottom of it. But they talk about the spies and the intelligence, the Black Loyalists, clothing and supplies, claims and memorials, and other little, facts and records. So we're going to go check out the military regiments. I want to talk about the regimental history. And we're going to go from A to Z. You have your American Legion. You have the American Volunteers. So if you see any of these things, you might want to get a pen and paper. I'm going to run through them. You see them, write them down so that you can compare them. If you see these on your ancestral documents, now you know who they was fighting for, whether they deserted, because maybe they were started off as loyalists in the beginning and then said, you know what, I think I'm gonna go fuck with old George and all of them or whatever, and changed their mind and they deserted them, dropped them like a hot potato, and went and switched sides. Quite possible. Definitely a serious scenario that people may want to consider. This is how you start to understand the things that they'll never teach us about, especially coming from a place where they don't teach you how to insert yourself into the narrative, right? Whatever the narrative may be. If you feel as though you were a slave, you have to find out where you were the slave at and why did you become a slave? What kind of slave were you? There's all sorts of different variables. Were you the slave that became a slave because you stole a horse, or did you write up a whole bunch of credit? And what's that shit mom used to say? Write a bunch of checks that your ass can't cash. Things like that. Because that credit system came and messed a lot of people up. And that was also some of the reasons why they were in serious financial trouble. So these are very, very interesting names, and I know a lot of people didn't hear about the different military regiments, right? So you got the American Legion, the American Volunteers, the Armed Boat Company, Associated Loyalists. You have these Black Hussars, Hussars. Very interesting. So here's the formation, and this is just a letter regarding the formation, and they're calling them the Brunswick soldiers. Now, do anybody know where Brunswick is? Brunswick is in Nova Scotia. So they have people from Nova Scotia coming down. So these Brunswick soldiers may be Abenaki, they may be Micmac, they may be Acadian. Some of your Creole that ends up down with the Gullah, right? Oh, we'll get to that if they're ready for that. Headquarters, New York, April 11, 1779. The Brunswick soldiers who are here without officers are to be mounted for the present and do duty as hussars. This is where they're getting the name of their regiment. Under Captain Dymar of the 60th Regiment, till they can be restored to their proper regiments. The following officers are appointed to the above troop, which to be attached to the corps command by Captain Ferguson of the 70th Regiment, Lieutenant de Moniter, late of the Anspach troops, Cornet Albus, late lieutenant in the Hessian troops. Now, the Hessians were mercenaries that were hired, I believe they were from Germany. And these are stone cold killers that they had to hire to come and kind of square up with the Indians, because they ain't never seen nothing like that guerrilla warfare and shit. So they had to go get some of them European people, and it cost Britain a pretty penny. And word of that inspired and sparked for the Continental Army to enlist Cherokees, Catawbas, to send maybe 300 or 400 of their men. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And some of our grandfathers, our Cherokee and Catawba grandfathers, were absolutely with that. Some of them wasn't. So when you say colonizer, did your granddaddy do it, your Indian granddaddy? We got to be very, very careful what it is that we're saying, right? Especially if we just don't know. Just don't know until you know. You don't know until you know. And it's way, way better to know. Okay. Hold on, where did I go? All right, my bad. You have the Armed Boat Company, Black Hussars. Okay, you also got the Black Pioneers. Let's talk about the Black Pioneers. A history of the Black Pioneers. The first thing one needs in order. Now, mind you, this is opinion, but we're going to look at the actual record. I'm reading from the perspective of the writers of this page. Okay, I don't know if they're biased. I have never read anything else. These are only going to lead you to other key points that you will have to absolutely search for yourself. But in order to come out of the program perspective, I'm giving it to you in a manner which you will know where to find the sources. You can't just read these books and then just think that the books are going to lead you, because the author, people put dubs on things, they embellish, they add their own spin to it for their own political, their own emotional reasons, for whatever reason. Not everybody is unbiased in respect to what it is that they put out as they're putting out this information too. So let's just keep that in mind. So I'm giving it to you in a perspective, and I know it's going different than the way that we were all taught. However, it's going to be provocative enough to where you now have the tools to be able to see which side of the fence, were you a stick or a stone, right? And what choices did your family make, and are you entitled to something? Daughters of the American Revolution, sons of the American Revolution, things of that nature. Well, a whole bunch of things that are going to come with that eventually. So we definitely want to know. And this is also big identifiers as to who it is that we're related to further back down the line. And you'll find that some of these Negro Europeans was, these may be the Africans that the other people may think that they're talking about them. So this is why they got to be careful with all of that. Right? Because of who they were calling African up until 1815 had nothing to do with dark-skinned people. Let me just say that. Right? I'm just going to say that. Okay, so now this is the Black Pioneers. It says the first thing one needs in order to understand the history of this regiment is a definition of the word pioneer, as it is pertained to the military in the 18th century. A pioneer was a soldier whose main task was to provide engineering duties in camp and in combat. These were things such as clearing grounds for camps, removing obstructions, digging necessaries, etc. It was not glamorous work, and in the British Army, it was often assigned to, quote unquote, blacks. Blacks were not permitted to serve as regular soldiers, either in the British Army or the provincial forces. However, in April of 1776, an expedition under General Henry Clinton arrived off of North Carolina. They were immediately joined by no fewer than 71 black runaway slaves. So now you got people saying, hey, Mr. White folk, take us the fuck up out of here. Right? They trying to get somewhere. They were immediately joined. They didn't hesitate no time. They wanted to get away from whatever was going on in North Carolina. Clinton developed an instant affection towards them. He organized them into a company and called them the Black Pioneers. So now he gave them some sort of something that was different than the rest of the people that they happened to want to get away from. So your beef may, your pension may be with the Loyalists, right? It may not have nothing to do with the newly formed United States. And this is why it's always good to know what the story is before we insert ourselves in this story. He placed the Marine. These men would provide the duties alluded to above. While the non-commissioned officers were to be black, the commissioned officers over them were white. He placed the Marine lieutenant, mind you, some of these white people were slaves too. Very much slaves. Very much. While the non-commissioned officers was to be black, okay, he placed the Marine lieutenant named George Martin. Okay, so now Martin is a very popular name. What happened to the Martins afterwards? See, everybody knows what kind of happened to the Confederate soldiers after they lost. A lot of them went to jail. And then some of the people, and I'm not sure, but Andersonville was for the Union soldiers. And some of them died. Some of them made it out of there. But now I need to go back into these records to find out if the people of Andersonville, which was in Georgia, 16,000 acres, maybe 20,000 acres, because they did try to expand it. But they had a lot of the Union soldiers there, right? In Confederate territory, nonetheless. But I don't know if those are the people that are responsible for the Devil's Punch Bowl, right? Now, who's that? Because the Union soldiers are the ones that blocked those people off and killed them. So I don't know why people see a Confederate flag and lose their motherfucking mind, because the Confederacy did not kill those people in Natchez at the Devil's Punch Bowl. But anyway, so George Martin is definitely going to be a familiar name, right? With the provincial rank of captain, the rank and file were composed almost exclusively of runaways from North and South Carolina and a few from Georgia. So if you want to know if your people ran away, check the regiments of George Martin. Okay? You want to know if they're the subject of some of these ads in the Pennsylvania Gazette or the Virginia Gazette, these newspapers in antiquity? Now you got some other places to cross-reference. I know these names seem corny, but again, if you don't follow these people, you might not never get to your Indian. You might not never get to your Portuguese. You might not never get to your African relative. And that's cheating. You don't got to cheat. But definitely, it's probably best not to talk too much, especially if you don't know where your folks was at in this shit. And what would the outcome be if things were the other way around? It's a different perspective. Instead of being all angry at Dwight, let's just fucking see what happened for real. It might not even be that goddamn serious. But in the interim, we're supposed to be figuring out ways to make sure that we insert ourselves in the narrative now, right? They vote us out, but we're putting ourselves back in. And sometimes it just be Monday through Friday, because on the weekends, niggas go to Blafrica and everywhere else that they have already been familiar with and won't stay home and learn about their own shit. But so Newport, New York, and Philadelphia, the company recruited many more runaways. So there was still slavery in New York up until perhaps the 1830s, maybe 1827, something like that. And then, of course, there's the kidnap game, the kidnap club with your the people that basically have Rikers Island here in New York City, the Rikers. Foreigners that came here and they basically built a jail. They were mayors of the city during a lot of these times, well, post-colonial anyway. But these same families just perpetrating the same fraud over and over and over again, assisting in, keeping this veil going. So now it says the Corps suffered no battle casualties in its history. So this particular regiment didn't lose nobody. The company recruited many more runaways, but never grew materially in size beyond 50 to 60 men. The new recruits barely keeping up with the numbers who died from disease and fatigue. The Corps suffered no battle casualties in its history. Indeed, the men were not armed, their function being solely support. In fact, in Philadelphia, the general orders stipulated their duties were to attend the scavengers, assist in cleaning the streets, and removing all the nuisances being thrown into the streets as a result of the war. That was their job. That's what they had them around to do. And some people figured it was better to do that, move the dead bodies, pick up the trash, the litter and shit, and all that, than to be on somebody's plantation doing whatever they didn't want to do, whatever it was that they didn't want to do. Clearly, they didn't like the conditions. They had a choice, and they made the choice. And some left, and some just said, nigga, you crazy. I wish you all the luck in the world. I ain't going nowhere. I like it here. Where we gonna go? In the woods with what? Can't take none of this shit with us. We ain't got no horse. Where we going? I ain't got no stove, no pot and pan. How we gonna feed the kids? Shit like that. They had some other things to consider. Some people just didn't give a fuck. They went for what they thought they knew. So there's a lot of going back and forth in Philadelphia. Now, if you know, New York was the capital, Philadelphia was the capital. This is way before Washington, D.C. New York was the capital. Philadelphia was the capital. Even New Jersey was the capital before. New Jersey was also the capital of the United States before, too. A lot of people don't really know that. So there's always a lot of great historic details that absolutely get missed. Certainly with the deliverance of it via frustration and a whole bunch of untruths and opinions and shit like that. Well, now you got some job to show you how to get to the bottom of some things, especially when it comes to a time frame where the records are not as easy to navigate through. So now some of these people, keep in mind, they're gonna call them blacks, and some of them absolutely are. We are not going to act like absolutely no African people or foreign people came in here, and that's just not fucking true. We're not going to act like slavery did not happen. Of course, we know it didn't happen the way that they said, but don't get caught up in the it wasn't nobody's slaves. They're fucking lying. That's not true. Okay, so with the fall of Charleston, now keep in mind, what did I just say? There was Chickamagua Wars. There's the second. This is the second time. This is the same time frame as the second Cherokee Wars that are now exploding. This is where you get in your political shifts. They're changing the guard with the chiefs and stuff like that, expanding into different territories. They're ceding land in different places. And this is also going to be right around the time where they ceded their land in Virginia, right? And I'm going to put that, let me see if I got that PTR so I can put that up for the year, for the people on Clubhouse. That'll give you the year that the Cherokee actually got rid of the lands. Let me see. in Virginia. That's not it. One second. So they were seeding land in different areas. But this was good. I wasn't really mad at it because what it did was it places the Cherokees in places where they say wasn't no Cherokees in Tennessee, wasn't no Cherokees in Virginia. It's a goddamn lie. Right? And they had to own land to seed that motherfucker. So it's a goddamn lie. It's a lie they tell. Hold on 1 second. I ain't got no glasses on either. Yeah, no, that's not it. So by them seeing this land, of course, they move into different areas of the Ohio Valley, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. Tennessee is still at this point New Echota. There is still Tellico, and these are the other towns that a lot of our ancestors are from. Right, especially I have the Sula Kingfisher family, the Five Killers. That's Nancy Ward. Those are your old settlers. Yeah, I think they're Five Killers. That's the Five Killers. Let me see. So they move into that area. Of course, now they're also moving into other people's territories. At this point, the Shawnee have now started disbanding, moving into a different area after they absolutely pulminate the Westos, right? They ran down on the Westos. You hardly ever hear anybody talking about the Westos. So there's some people that need to claim their Westo ancestors, they got washed into something. What? I ain't saying I know, but I am going to tell you they did exist. You never hear nobody talking about them, though. Got to say their names too. They were here. Somebody blended in. Somebody was able to get away from some sort of peril. And if they weren't, and you're a product of that via orphanage or however it went down, you still have a claim, right? Now, how do you feel that your people might have been wiped out by other Indians, though? Right? See, that's how really it has nothing to do with the white and all of them when you realize people got fucked up by some other Indians. Let me see. And when they did that, they also lost the ferries. So, the Indians were in control of the tolls, the bridges, the tunnels, and etc. So in this instance, when they're ceding their land, they are also losing the ferries. So there's other commerce and things that they're not able to participate in. I do apologize. I couldn't go find the PTR to show when the Cherokee land was ceded. But when I do find it, I will put that in the Discord. But it was definitely somewhere between 1777 and definitely between 1777 and 1775. 79. Now they're talking about the fall of Charleston. And in South Carolina, of course, the Black pioneers accompanied General Clinton. So now it's telling you that some other outside Black people have now come into South Carolina, right, via this particular corps. And then they had raised a surprise meeting of another corps of Black pioneers, men raised in Savannah, Georgia, during the siege in 1779. So what was the siege in 1779 when they captured Charleston? Now you have your Battle of Savannah. So they're talking about the men that were raised in Savannah. This is homeboy Henry Cacique is on this regiment, right? Henry Cacique of the Gens de Couleur. He's played a major role in the Haitian Revolution after being raised here in Georgia, colonial Georgia, pre-colonial Georgia, as per the French. Yep, as per the French. So, Royal North Carolina Regiment. And look at the names here, right? Some of our Royal North Carolina Regiment, the Stewarts. Didn't dawn on nobody. The Stewarts. With the fall of Charleston, Clinton returned to New York, taking a part of the army with him, including Captain Stewart's company. Stewart himself would take a temporary break from the unit to try his hand at raising the cause of North Carolina Highlanders. These going to be some Highlanders, going to be some Scots, right? Swarthy Scots. Stewart means swarthy, right? Brown, dark. You see where it's going. Highlanders. Did they just call anyone Highlanders? Probably not. Probably not. So let's take a look at, I'll go back to that. Let me just finish reading that before I actually go into the North Carolina Regiment. But this is also a way where people are going to see where they brownie Europeans came from. The new British commander-in-chief, Sir Guy Carleton, was aware of Clinton's promise to the blacks, right? So Clinton started making promises and deals. What was the promise that this man made your family? Is very important that we know, because if these promises got neglected or broken, this is going to be key and pivotal into you getting some act right for your folks. Right? This is why I say you can make a lifetime out of fucking putting lawsuits for against these torts and things, these egregious things that happen. You just have to know what they are and how they apply to you. So now they talk about Sir Guy Carleton. He's aware of the promise that blacks he made to blacks, which was more than likely going to be their freedom, right? So it says a lot of them stayed in New York for the remainder of the war in their normal duties. The men were often allotted out as servants, cooks, tradesmen to high-ranking British officers. They were among the last of the provincials remaining in New York in 1783, prior to sailing with others for Nova Scotia, because they had to go. New York was no longer in the company of the Virginia Company. The colony had to go. So let me go to this North Carolina Regiment. Introduction to the North Carolina Loyalist units. The foundation for most North Carolina Loyalist units starts in January of 1776 when Governor Josiah Martin commanded several leading Loyalists, many of them Scots. See, I just said I didn't read that far. Several of them Scots to repair to the royal standard and raise troops for the king's service. Despite what you will read in many publications, this was not the creation of the North Carolina Highland Regiment. All these men were under the denomination of the North Carolina Provincials. With the word provincial in this case is confusing because they were not provincials, as was commonly known throughout the war, i.e., that establishment of loyalist troops that served for the duration of the war and were liable for service throughout America. These North Carolina provincials consisted of between 1,200 and 1,400 men, including Highlanders, riflemen, and light horse. To make things more confusing, so they're wasting fucking money, it looks like. They was completely caught off guard, and this is how they end up getting their head bust. Riflemen, light horse. To make things more confusing, their commander, Brigadier General Donald McDonald, was also a major in the Royal Highland Immigrants, as were some of the officers and men in the provincials. The force was crushed as history records at Moores Creek Bridge in February of 1776, and McDonald and scores of officers were captured. This put an end to the North Carolina provincials, except for a number of officers who remained as prisoners of war until as late as 1781. So now there's a remnant of people that were in some sort of imprisonment as of 1781 still. Were they on the British prison hulls like the Jersey or some of the other ships that they had? They had whole complete ports, like especially in New York, especially in different parts of New Jersey. You know, New Jersey had East and West New Jersey. The same way there was a East and West Florida, there was a East and a West New Jersey as well. So now, and half of it was Sweden. New Jersey was also New Sweden. Those were different colonizers, and New Jersey and Sweden kind of got in the game because Sweden gave up a $25 million check to the United States after the Declaration of Independence. And France is the ones that actually came side by side to the rescue with the soldiers, with the money to help finance this as well, against Great Britain. In the interim, the United States, George Washington, all of them still got a tab to Britain. Crazy shit going on. Lots of things going on at the same damn time. Okay, so that was your Black pioneers. Then it says that no other North Carolina units were created until 1779. So now here you go, your John Hamilton. An influential North Carolina loyalist by the name of John Hamilton fled the province with a number of others in a chartered vessel and joined the British at New York. Hamilton set sail with the force to take Georgia under Lieutenant Colonel Archibald Campbell. How many people from Georgia are related to the Campbells? Right? So we know that North Carolina and Georgia had a heavy Scottish influence. Most of the Germans came in through Pennsylvania. Most of the British came in through Virginia and Maryland. Right? And most of the people that are African came in through New York and Rhode Island. Very important to know. So they were looking to take over Georgia, probably salty after the Battle of Savannah didn't work out too tough. Didn't work out well, right? They had a whole bunch of things going on. And you know, these Tories ready to bust Cornwallis upside his head, right? So it says the Royal North Carolina Regiment served in several bloody encounters, most notably Hanging Rock and the Battle of Camden. Camden is New Jersey. So when they take these places and they siege it, boom, this is our capital. We putting our flag in here right now, right? 1781, they were a part of Cornwallis's army that entered North Carolina, attracting more recruits to the unit. By this time, the corps consisted of 7 companies, including a light infantry company, and an 8th being raised later to march to Virginia. Now they get ready to come to Virginia and set it off. Right? So who are they going to meet at Virginia? You're going to meet your chiefs of what tribes? At Williamsburg, that now have first and last names and may have gotten absorbed in this shit. And some of you niggas will never have no idea if one of these British people was really one of your Indian grandfathers. Oh, it get deep. It's there. So I want you to get familiar with some of these regiments. And here's again, Governor Martin now. The Martin guy from before in 1780, he's now governor. His family line is now governor in North Carolina. And they said they have 10 companies, each of 50 men, officers drawn from idle exchange veterans of the North Carolina Provincial. So now they're getting the same veterans that just got finished kicking ass or not. And they were commissioned and appointed for all the companies before the men were actually brought in to serve. So they was kind of ass betting. Right? Interesting. So that's that. Let me go back to the other couple of regiments. Very interesting. Black Dragoons, aka the Black Pioneer Troop. Now this is in 1782, so it's a little different. So now this is the expansion of them. And these links go to various different pages. Again, I'm going to drop this in the Discord. Hold on. Let me give it to y'all. Okay, there you go. So I dropped it on the Discord. Hold on 1 second. Okay, let everybody drop a 1 in the chat. I just want to make sure you can hear. This is actually the first time I was able to look up at the chat. Jen Mohawk, what's up, baby? L. Haywood. Cameron, good brother, my good brother. What's happening, beloved? Drop a 1 in the chat. I just want to make sure you guys out there can hear me. Let me see. Drop a 1. There we go. Okay. All right. Let me get back to it. So Simpson to Paris. Now, these are going to be some of the letters that were written, some of the military documents that were saved. And keep in mind, this is from a British perspective, okay? And this is from the headquarters camp before Charlestown. So this is regarding South Carolina militia. His Majesty, having thought proper to direct a force to be sent to Carolina in order to re-establish his government and to extinguish the most wicked and daring rebellion which still subsists, notwithstanding the gracious terms repeatedly offered in order to reclaim his rebellious subjects in the colonies. They're excellent. So now this shows that King George is now fucking negotiating with these niggas and they still wilding out, right? So this is where some people are like, okay, well, they already said we ain't gonna pay no taxes and shit like that. And the United States has every fucking intention of taxing these motherfuckers. So they act like they created this instance. Oh, King George is gonna tax us and shit for the tea. But this is where this nigga saying, all right, I ain't gonna tax you. But now they're in the instance where they fucking want to tax everybody else. And this is what their independence, why it was so important to them, right? Because they still got all of these debts that they're accumulating. And now they're going to have to pay some of these lumps back. So it says, Sir, His Majesty, having thought it proper to direct a force to be sent to Carolina in order to reestablish his government and to extinguish the most wicked and daring rebellion which still subsists, notwithstanding the gracious terms repeatedly offered in order to reclaim his rebellious subjects in the colonies. Their excellencies, the commanders in chief of the Army and Navy, have come hither in person with very powerful fleet and army for those purposes and to rescue the king's faithful subjects from the misery and oppression they are now suffering from those men whose ambitious politics have overwhelmed North America with misery and ruin. Now, these are the actual word for word documents. So this is not the editor's opinion. When it comes down to these specific letters that I'm reading, this is the actual documents that's going to be housed in either, Canada, some parts here of the United States, and then certainly, of course, Great Britain as well. And some of these things may even be in the Scottish Museum now that they're mentioning people that were predominantly Scots, right? And just, you take it for what it's worth. Grandma and grandpa should be worth everything. Okay, so although the forts already in the province may be sufficiently complete for every purpose of conquest, yet the exertions of the king's loyal subjects will much accelerate and facilitate the establishment of the peace and quiet of the country. And it is not to be doubted, but that they will use their utmost endeavors to accomplish as soon as possible a measure so conducive to their own safety, interest, and happiness. And His Excellency Sir Henry Clinton have judged it proper to send fit persons amongst the inhabitants of the interior parts of the province, in those whose loyalty from their past exertions and late professions there is much reason to confide, in order to inform them of his intentions, that they may be better enabled in assisting in reestablishing His Majesty's government, together with peace and happiness in this almost ruined and distracted country. So now they're talking about how America's going to shit. Totally not according to their fucking plans, but according to how George Washington and everybody else in cahoots thereof saw that this shit was going down. Whether they were wise enough to be involved in the chess moves, they were definitely making moves. Some as bishops, some as kings, some as motherfucking pawns. And this is how you get to the forensics of what pieces on the board they were, because everybody had a hand, right? This way we don't really gotta blame nobody. We could fucking move on and figure out what's ours, who owe what happened, and what have you. And we pass the shit down, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And His Excellency Sir Clinton have judged it proper. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And as you have agreed to go upon this service, it is His Excellency's pleasure that in endeavoring to execute it, you will have regard to the following rules of your conduct. First, you will proceed with all convenient expedition to such places in the country as are inhabited by the loyal subjects, and be diligent to inform them of the force which is arrived. And you are authorized to give them the strongest assurances of effectual countenance, protection, and support. Secondly, you will inform them that it is the general's intentions, as soon as Charlestown is reduced, to march a force into the back country, and that is therefore his pleasure that they should hold themselves in readiness to assemble on the first notice of the king's troops being in motion. And in the meantime, advise them to collect as much ammunition and provisions as they can procure, that they may not be distressed or want of those articles until they join the Royal Army. So wait a minute now. They want to go into the back country of Charleston. They want to go through Indian country. These motherfuckers had help. They had help. They had some kind of help too. You think they was just able to just go and lay up in the motherfucking swamps until they was able to get enough regiments? Because George Washington is clearly formulating. And what was it that Lord Dunmore, the British Army, is telling every fucking body that they was enslaved? Everybody, indentured, black, white, every fucking slave. You fight with us, you will no longer be a fucking slave anymore. And yet there was still a good amount of people that fucking said, now fuck them, George Washington, that's my man. Why? Why? The British is making all of these offers and things like that. And they trying to sneak through the back country. They fucking had help. Which Indians was it? We ain't there yet. But you best believe somebody was fucking helping them. So now they're talking about as soon as they are assembled in sufficient numbers, they will endeavor to seize and secure such of the people as have been most subservient to the purposes of the rebellious leaders in enforcing their tyrannical laws, and thereby prevent the mischief they will attempt and the distresses they will cause to the defenseless families left behind. So they like, nigga, don't be stupid. What, you gonna leave your family behind to go chase after George Washington and these guys? Is that what you gonna do, sir? You know? So you have let me see. Commanders in chief. Let me go back to some of these regiments. And now you're gonna see where the Jamaicans pull up, the muster rolls, some of the names of the people, right? All goes back. It all goes back. Now I'm familiar with Butler's Rangers. A lot of Butler's Rangers are incorporated in most of the war movies and stuff like that, right? There's a really good show that I loved called Turn. And that show was on, I think it's on like Netflix. I don't know if it's AMC or whatever channel, but it's George Washington Spies. Completely fucking interesting. If you're into that, um, tons of history. You got your guy that played. He played in the show Runaway Underground. He played in the show Underground. He also plays on some other kind of show about Boston where he's like a prosecutor. I forget the brother's name. Real handsome guy. I forget his name. Um, he played with Jussie Smollett's sister in that show Underground. He was the other star in that show. But anyway, he also plays in this series of George Washington, and it's a complete cloak and dagger, very Mission Impossible spy thing, completely interested and totally relative. Now, that's also going to be based off of some of the stories where they're talking about the spies and whatnot, and how they had up their system to get messages where they would pretend to be allies of the British and make sure that George Washington and the Continental and the Whigs were able to get this intel, right? And of course, nobody is thinking that any of the Negroes or the slaves or any of the other people that are actually from England would consider trading against the king as well. So they had a real serious fucking network up, and they definitely didn't have no two-way pages. They wasn't texting and none of that shit. So it was a very intricate thing. And then there's all these places that you don't realize there were skirmishes right near the plantations and places that they're trying to tell people that they were enslaved at. So there's so many different things going on. A lot of remarkable history. Now, this is where even down to the Ranger women petition for support. So if Grandpa didn't make it back, and these are why these are important. So if Grandpa didn't make it back, now you get to see some of the list of the people of the grievances from the widows that were complaining and looking to receive compensation as a result of their husband not coming back, not being able to provide. Right. So this is a Ranger Women petition for support. The humble petition of Elizabeth Phillips and Dorothy Windecker, wives of Nicholas Phillips and Henry Windecker, Rangers and Colonel Butler's Rangers, laying before your excellency the unhappy situation we labor under in being absent from our husbands, that laying at Niagara, and we at this place with our families. As for the provisions, we can have no complaint of, as there is no more allowed. But the water and firewood is the only reason we have to complain on. And at this place, there is nothing to be earned the whole year through. But therefore, humbly praise that your excellency would take into consideration that we might be allowed to go to Niagara to our husbands and be allowed some support, and that the said Elizabeth Phillips, having a boy in Sir John's regiment, and if your excellency pleases, should be glad to have him back, as all the other sons, and my husband is in the Rangers, boring one son that still lays in prison, and her husband laid in prison near 4 years, and came in long with Benjamin Davis from New York, that is her son-in-law, to Nicholas Phillips. And if your excellency pleases to grant us the favor to draw provisions at Niagara, shall forever be bound to pray, we being his majesty's most dutiful and loyal humble servant. So now she's saying forever be bound. Like, so now this lady's making a contract, right? For something. She's asking for something. She's saying that her son and her husband, like basically all the men in their family going to fight this fucking war, and we out here broke. There's nothing we can do to get no bread. Can we please have permission to go to Niagara, to whatever fort, right, where they're at, whatever town that they're harboring in, to go and get some type of chicken? Like, I just, which is kind of weird to me. Like, Hunker, he's at war. Leave him alone. You know what I'm saying? Like some of these things probably should have been worked out. But then there's also the instance that women, I'm sure, didn't believe that their husband absolutely fucking just defected. I'm pretty sure they just didn't believe that some of those things happened too. Right? I want to get to I'm going to go to the American Legion just because my boy Benedict Arnold, he had a whole different fucking perspective. Let me go back to that. Let me see. And this was Benedict Arnold's proclamation. So after he gets found out that he is, he's working with the French, but the French is actually trying to mess with his wife, if I'm not mistaken. Because Benedict Arnold was set to marry. There's a lot of people that the Shipping family of Philadelphia. If you're familiar with the Shipping families, they go really far back in antiquity of Pennsylvania. Benedict Arnold was trying to marry off one of the Shipping family's daughters. So this is his proclamation. Now, again, this is not the author of this website's account. This is actually the record that's transcribed. Okay. So by Brigadier General Arnold, a proclamation to the officers and soldiers of the Continental Army who have the real interest of their country at heart and who are determined to be no longer the tools and dupes of Congress or of France, having reason to believe that the principles I have avowed in my address to the public of the 7th instant animated the greatest part of this continent. I rejoice in the opportunity I have inviting you to join His Majesty's arms. His Excellency Sir Clinton has authorized me to raise a corps of cavalry and infantry who are to be clothed, subsisted, and paid as other troops are in the British service, and those who bring in horses, arms, and accoutrements are to be paid their value or have liberty to sell them. To every non-commissioned officer and private, a bounty of 3 guineas will be given. So they giving foreign money. The guineas is Italian currency. A lot of these people was paying their fucking way over here with guineas. And guineas may have worked in the northern states, such as New York, probably Vermont, because they still had other currency in different states. Now, also different parts of New York in itself, they go from dog money, lion money, to guineas, to shillings, to all of these different types of currencies that were introduced and circulated throughout the colonies that may have had nothing or very little to do with the what the history books may include, but it very much existed, these different commercial systems, even within the small confines of just New York City and its 5 boroughs. Completely different currencies going on. So now it says that to every non-commissioned officer and private, a bounty of 3 guineas will be given. And as the commander-in-chief, please to allow me to nominate the officers. I shall, with infinite satisfaction, embrace the opportunity of advancing men whose valor I have witnessed and whose principles are favorable to a union with Britain, the true American liberty. The rank they obtain in the king's service will bear a proportion to their former rank and the number of men they bring with them. So now these is the other people that defected, right, from the continental side. So now it says it is expected that the lieutenant colonel of cavalry will bring with him or recruit in a reasonable time 75 men. So he's looking for 50 men, major on the horse, 50 men. He's looking for a captain for 30 men, a major for 50 men, a captain for 30 men, lieutenant for 15 men, cornet for 12 men, a sergeant for 6 men, lieutenant colonel of infantry for 75 men, major for 50 men, a captain for 30, lieutenant for 15, and an ensign was in charge of 12 men, a sergeant again in charge of 6. So it says, great these encouragements must appear to such have suffered every distress of want, pay, hunger, and nakedness from the neglect, contempt, and corruption of Congress. They are nothing to the motives which I expect will influence the brave and generous minds I hope to have the honor to command. I wish to lead a chosen band of Americans to the attainment of peace, liberty, and safety, the first objects in taking the field, and with them to share in the glory of rescuing our native country from the grasping hand of France. You see where they throw their shit in? Now this is where they inflict their opinion, and this is why they went to war right the fuck after the United States says they're getting their independence. As well as the ambitious and interested views of a desperate party among ourselves who, in listening to French overtures and rejecting those from Great Britain, have brought the colonies to the very brink of destruction. Friends, fellow soldiers and citizens, arouse and judge for yourselves. Reflect on what you've lost. Consider to what you are reduced, and by your courage repel the ruin that still threatens you. Your country once was happy and had the preferred peace been embraced. Your last 2 years of misery had been spent in peace and plenty, and repairing the desolations of a quarrel that you would have set the interests of Great Britain and America in its true light, and cemented their friendship. Whereas you are now the prey of the avarice, the scorn of your enemies, and the pity of your friends. You were promised liberty by the leaders of your affairs, but is there an individual in the enjoyment of it saving your oppressors? Who among you dare speak or write what he thinks against the tyranny which has robbed you of your property, imprisons your persons, drags you to the field of battle, and is daily deluging your country with your blood? You are flattered with independency as preferable to the redress of grievances, and for that shadow instead of real felicity, you are sunk into all the wretchedness of poverty in the rapacity of your own rulers. Already you are disqualified to support the pride of character they taught you to aim at, and you must inevitably shortly belong to one or the other great powers their folly and wickedness have drawn into conflict. Happy for you that you may still become the fellow subjects of Britain, if you nobly disdain to be the vassals of France. Boom. So this is their position. What is America now but a land of widows, orphans, and beggars? And should the parent nation cease her exertions to deliver you, what security remains to you for the enjoyment of the consolations of that religion for which your fathers braved the ocean, the heathen, and the wilderness? Do you know that the eye which guides this pen lately saw your mean and profligate Congress at mass for the soul of a Roman Catholic in purgatory, and participating in the rights of a church against whose anti-Christian corruptions your pious ancestors would have witnessed with their blood? So Benedict Arnold had a completely different thing, and he's like, man, fuck all that. I'll do a lot of things, but I ain't gonna lose to no Frenchman, right? Even though a Frenchman was also sleeping with his girlfriend, so that could have been completely with the woman that he was courting. That could have been completely a old tender pecker nigga moment, right? Could have him being tender. So now, but they had some fancy ass uniforms. So if you look up the colors, the American Legion had some really ass nice uniforms, the little red and green and white, like almost like Italian colors and shit like that. But he made sure that they was dressed well. He wanted to make sure they got paid and shit. It's a little fair, right? Trying to be fair. So this letter he wrote to Arnold, American Legion. This is Arnold writing to General Clinton, London, May 26, 1783. Long after the war. This is right when it takes them a couple of years to get out. The same way, they fought in Iraq, and it took them a long time for Al-Qaeda to fucking leave the place. The same way the Taliban, they're right back. But, they had a certain amount of time in order to leave. And the same thing in the case of Britain. They had a few years in order to pull out all of their stakes and affairs, right? And tie up their loose ends. So it says, sir, in compliance with your request to me, the state claims of the American Legion in writing for your consideration. I beg to observe that it appears by my warrant that the corps was to consist of 1 colonel, 2 lieutenant colonels, 2 majors, 11 captains, 16 lieutenants, 16 cornets, and ensigns, and 960 non-commissioned officers and soldiers. It also appears by the returns that there has been appointed and now belongs to the Legion 1 major, 6 captains, 5 lieutenants, 3 cornets, and ensigns who ought to have raised 331 men to entitle them to their commissions. So then it has the I guess the prices of what they would seek. You guys on YouTube can certainly see that. So they were able to list 386 men, which was 55 over and above the complement. Now let's get some names, because now you're gonna see some of these familiar names. Let me see. Get the muster rolls of the people that were there, that were around. So now you have your Caledonian volunteers. Your Caledonian. Where is Caledonia? Caledonia in the Isle of Darien, the Darien Peninsula, Nicaragua, Panama, Cuba, not Cuba, Colombia, New Caledonia, Scotland, New Scotland. Scotland tried to boss up. Lots of Scots went to the Caribbean as well. All gentlemen, natives of North Britain, who are emulous of that noble spirit of loyalty and attachment, which so eminently distinguishes their countrymen at home on the present occasion, are hereby informed that a corps to be styled the Caledonian Volunteers is now raising to be commanded by their countryman, Captain William Sutherland, right? So now these are people that may have got sent there and they're here training. They're training people there. There's something going on besides the fact that it is also a protectorate of Great Britain, right? So Caledonia is based off of the Scottish heritage. The Scottish heritage. Hold on one second. Let me see. Hold on one second, y'all. Let me see. Okay, so now I'm going to see some of the list of the people coming from Virginia that left with Lord Dunmore or put themselves in this position, and now they trying to stuck between a rock and a hard place, because now at best they can get to Canada, but they definitely want to get to a territory that's not going to put them back in Virginia. And now that they done showed everybody what time they was, a lot of these people would get branded, right? Even the deserters in the war, specifically more so towards the actual Civil War and shit like that. A lot of those Confederate granddaddies got branded. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about that. I guess they don't have to, if everything that people see about a Confederate flag, for some fucking unbeknownst to them real reason besides the program, and they lose their fucking shit when they see it instead of really understanding what that shit is about. So now they're mentioning some other names here, right? The Mackenzies, those who wish to seize his favorable opportunity of doing honor to their native country and manifesting their zeal and attachment to His Majesty's person and government, are desired to apply to Captain Alexander McLeod at the coffee house to Lieutenant Donald McBain. Okay. So now they're basically, you can see where they were quartered in people's houses. And a lot of this is cool too, because when they mention North Carolina, they mention South Carolina. You know, the British soldiers would quarter up in people's houses on people's land, and they would sit there like that was, you know, like they like that was the trap spot. They stayed there until the coast was clear. They didn't have hotels. They didn't have forts everywhere. When they got moved around based off of the military strategy and the way that they lost, they may have had to go stay on somebody free people of color land, which also entitled them to some sort of reward. Everything wasn't always something for nothing. And then you have the people that have nothing to do with any of this, and you know what they're doing? They're supplying these companies, these regiments with food. So now when you have these people that are ending up in what they call in Virginia, what they call in North Carolina, it may be Tennessee, just haven't been established yet. Maybe parts of what we call something else that may not have been assigned, or definitely a colony. Kentucky was a colony, actually for a very small window. They had, at this point, while this is going on in the 1770s, there's Transylvania. Transylvania was a failed colony that Daniel Boone and a lot of those people related to the Boone family tried to get it shaken. What's good? We'll talk about that another time. But yes, lots of cool fucking caveats and spicy motherfucking meatballs that they absolutely didn't drop that help you get to the bottom of some shit. So I ain't gonna hold y'all too long. We're gonna part 2 this because I got my other history teacher that'll be here with me tomorrow. But I definitely wanted to put that out there. You guys got the drop on this, and YouTube on the what do you call it? What's that thingy? Starts with a D, the Discord, excuse me. So we definitely gonna do that. The rest of this conversation, we're gonna chop it up over here in Clubhouse. I got my beloved peoples there. Pull up at No Grandma Killers in Clubhouse. We're going to finish the rest of this. We got the part 2 tomorrow. We're going to do the other half of the presentation. I'm going to show you the names and stuff and how to find them through these other places. Ancestry, Family Search, the National Archives, Library of Congress. I'll show you how to get to these other records. My brother Damon Taylor is going to be joining me tomorrow. So that's that. So check out the Discord. You can see the links for the things that I put up tonight. I want to thank everybody for pulling up with the pull up. You want to chop it up? You got any questions or whatever? Let's move on over to Clubhouse and we're going to get up another time. Okay. In the meantime, you guys take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Chapisa la chique.